So welcome to the Unitarian Church of Baton Rouge. My name is Nathan. I'm the senior minister here. We're here this weekend because Reverend Chris Long is being installed tomorrow. Online people, just to fill you in, we forgot to start the stream, so we're doing the whole thing over. That's the reaction. So the idea for today, do you want to say the idea or do you want me to?
You.
Okay, I'm going to say the idea. The idea for today was to make this weekend really about a celebration of this church, which, for those who don't know, we are the largest Unitarian Universalist church between Atlanta and Dallas. And frankly, the story of this church is remarkable in its own right, and we didn't want this to just be a celebration of ministry, but a celebration of what this church has done. And so we have gathered some of the pillars of the church to retell some of the story. We cannot retell it all, but this is going to be a taste of the story. So with that, should I introduce more stuff? We do have, if you are a tactile person, we got a puzzle over here, and we got all sorts of manipulatives out there. Don't take the archival stuff, just the stuff on the sidewall. You can bring it to your table, use it, however will help you be a little more present. Is there anything else I should say?
No.
No, nothing else.
Good afternoon, all. Again, thank you to my esteemed and amazing colleague, the Reverend Nathan Ryan. Let's give it up for Nathan. Those of you who are not Unitarian Universalists among us, we always say all are welcomed always, right? We don't have a creed that one has to believe, but you got to believe in something, right? And if that's pagan, if that's atheist, bring it on. If that's Christian, Jewish, Muslim, bring it on. If that's UU from birth, how many UUers from birth in here? Whoop, whoop, from childhood. All right. Esteemed guests from near and far, we light our chalice here at the Unitarian Church of Baton Rouge. I've invited a few members from our planning committee. Come on in, the door is open. If you want, other than eating inside, come on in. The door is open, and we have our chalice lighting words are featured in your program, and I hope you got one. The lighting words: with hope to make this a better world, we light this flame. Its light is a symbol of the power of love. Somebody was starting to sing the song, we have a doxology after that, and somebody behind me was starting to sing our doxology. So it is also true that we are on borrowed land, and we do a land acknowledgement here. And two of the peoples that we know held strong community here are the Homa and the Bayagola. So in honoring that, we remember that these are borrowed lands, and we do that with the sacred connection. As some of you may know, I had a chance to meet with some of the elders of the Homa since I've been here in the few short months, 9 to be exact. Oh, I said I wasn't going to share that anymore. The land acknowledgement, but it's also true that we are on lands that were formerly a plantation called the Cortana Plantation, and we'll be doing the soul work to make connections with those communities through history and finding and to name who those people are. So again, we welcome you, and I'll turn it back over to, oh no, we already did that, right? 1 second.
So about one of the skills that I have that I do not like to have when the pandemic hit is I now know how to make videos. Some of the clergy may appreciate the misery of that. So what Reverend Chris said is, could you look through our archives and find some photos that can just briefly tell the history of this church without words, just photos. So we got 3 minutes of that. Whenever you're ready, Mike. So let's go ahead and pause, Mike. When I said video, I meant there's also sound.
As Reverend Nathan has shared, we're going to be listen to the living history presentation of some of the pillars of the church, and we'd like to start with Miss Beverly Wilson.
I have to tell you that I taught art almost 50 years, so I've been used to talking in front of people, but not with a microphone, so give me awareness of that. I was born Beverly Elizabeth Mangum, and my family and I moved to Baton Rouge in 1954. I was 10 years old. Daddy and we had attended the Unitarian Church in Atlanta, Georgia. So when we moved here, my dad was looking for kindred spirits, and he found the Unitarian Fellowship of Baton Rouge. And so I have been attending this church, or at least a part of this church, for 69 years. So some of the things that I'm going to share are things that I know through institutional memory, and some of them I know through childhood and teen years and adult years in this church. So I will begin when we started in 1954. The church, the fellowship actually, had started a couple of years before that with some meetings at LSU and trying to figure out what to do. So finally, a space was rented at the Heidelberg Hotel, which is 1 block off of the Mississippi River downtown, and the members would meet there and the kids had Sunday school. I can't remember much of that particular era, but I know that we thought nothing of the fact that many of our Sunday school teachers were university professors. One of them was a carpenter who built our pulpit over there. And so we were used to all these people. They became lifelong friends for my entire family. So shortly after we started going to the Heidelberg Hotel, we had to move. And so we moved a few blocks down the street to the old state capitol. And if you've ever been on the Mississippi River and seen that old castle-looking building that has been considered to be really wild and weird, we loved being there as kids because we climbed up in among the stained glass windows and all sorts of things to have our Sunday school classes in the old state capitol. Shortly after that, we moved to the YWCO, the Young Women's Christian Organization, not the YWCA. It's an integrated institution. We started at the YWCO, and this comes from institutional memory and vague memories of mine. But when sermons were given or lectures were given in the fellowship, it was the members of the church. They would write their own little speeches, or they would get packets from UUA with what is called trunk sermons, and they would share that with the congregation. We kids had Sunday school. My brother always talked about being able to drink coffee out of demi-tasse cups and played games in the yard, and we really enjoyed being there. Well, one Sunday, and you have to realize how serious this ended up being, one Sunday, a group of white men in white shirts and ties and jackets and slacks came in to the fellowship, and they walked in the back of the meeting room and just stood there. Well, later that week, we were told that we could no longer meet at the YWCO. Those men either were KKK or the Knights of the White Camellia or a group like that, but they reported to the YWCO people that we allowed black people to attend our fellowship, and so we were booted out. Then after that was a real key time for all of us. We ended up making a short trips. We were going to the trade school on Acadian Thruway in amongst the big machines that they were using to teach kids and adults how to weld and how to do carpentry and whatever. So we had Sunday school classes amongst this huge machinery. So we stayed there for a while. Then we went a little bit closer into town, further down Acadian Thruway, closer to LSU, to the Jewish synagogue. We were not there very long, so I don't remember that very well, but I do know we were there. Then our first big break came along. We, meaning the adults, the parents, had collected enough funds to be able to buy an old 3-story white building on Government Street, like 6 blocks from downtown. The kids loved it because it had fire escapes that we could play with. And we as church members and families, we did all the caretaking. We set up chairs, we took down chairs, we did whatever needed to be done. Well, and we were so thrilled to own our own property. But then the city government and the state government and whatever government it was decided to put the interstate through our building. So once again, we became vagabonds. But the difference was we had some money that was ours because they bought the property from us. So the people, including my father, who was the president around that time, made the decision not to spend the money we were given, but to put it in the bank and figure what the next step would be as it stayed in the bank. So we went further out Government Street to 5803 Government Street. It was two white buildings. The big building in the front was where the meeting room was for the adults and like the teenage Sunday school classes. The house that was like at the back of the lot was a small little house, and it became the Sunday school classes. And my mother was one of the people that was an RE director there. So we stayed there for a number of years, again, folding and unfolding chairs, having multiple spaghetti suppers, and then mowing the lawn and preparing things. I remember one time, I must have been 13 or 14, and I worked the yard, and I got poison ivy so bad that I had to wear my arm in a sling for about 6 weeks, but there was no more poison ivy on the property. So the elders in the church were looking all this time as to what to do next and when to do next, because we were there for several years, but it wasn't like it was an idle time, that they were figuring. Reverend Orlando would come up from New Orleans about once a month, and the church members would be giving the sermons here and there. So, but then this piece of property right here on Goodwood Boulevard came up for sale. It was a big empty area. It's hard for you to imagine, but back then this was way out in the country. So we bought the land. It's since become sort of church road. There are a number of other churches on this street now, but we bought the land. We still sat on it for a while and had our Sunday school and our church services at on the Government Street site. But then the plans came together to build the sanctuary that is the building right behind you. It's now a fellowship hall and a meeting area for Sunday school kids. But in the planning, they always knew that they wanted space for the children. Because from when I was a child, it was considered important that we have our faith available to the young. And so we built this new building, we dedicated it. My first marriage was actually one of the first weddings in the church. And in the late 1970s and the early 80s, I was actually the first professional RE director that we had for 8 or 10 years. In fact, this chalice necklace that I have was what the church presented to me when I retired, because I am trained as a professional art educator, and I was working part-time RE director, part-time teaching art in the schools, and I finally had to focus on one versus the other. But anyway, so I was following in my mother's footsteps as RE director. We had lots and lots of people start to join us, because in the early years, there might be 30 or 35 people, and that's counting the kids. So it's got bigger and bigger, and finally we gained enough funds. We had the wisdom, and again, I'm using we as the institutional we, had the wisdom to build that building on the back of the property so there would be room when we got bigger, because we believed we were going to get bigger. And so we had saved this piece of the land to build a larger sanctuary. While we were still in that building, one of the things that we did was have a referendum vote and voted to change the name from the Unitarian Fellowship of Baton Rouge to the Unitarian Church of Baton Rouge. And so that became our name, and then as UUA actually became Unitarian Universalists, we added that automatically. And then this building was added, and we really knew we had gotten to heaven to have this particular piece of property, a nice parking lot. Our neighbors were allowing us to use their parking, and the program grew. And so that's sort of a general overview of 69 years, and I hope 6 to 9 minutes. I don't know how long. going to turn the mic over to our true historian, Becky Curo, and she's going to tell you the leadership aspects of the church.
Thank you, Beverly. I will talk about the legacy of leadership that has resulted from the founding. The foundation of the legacy of leadership that undergirds the history of our church was laid by the founders from the earliest days of the forming Unitarian Fellowship, described in Beverly's wonderful presentation. The leadership in those early days was somewhat informal, but effective and strong, as indicated in the success they experienced in founding the Unitarian Fellowship of Baton Rouge. However, the importance of formal leadership was recognized early on, and members elected their first president, excuse me, in early 1952, within months of the fellowship's chartering. A roster of strong presidents has followed, with many presidents providing leadership in signally important chapters in the church's evolving history. The strong leadership that permeates our church history is represented by the Wall of History, with pictures of ministers and presidents, with presidents from 1952 to 2022. It is located in the alcove in the narthex just outside the sanctuary. Included on the Wall of History is a plaque with a picture and a brief history of the Reverend Albert Orlando, who Beverly has mentioned, who figures significantly in the founding of the Unitarian Fellowship of Baton Rouge. He was at that time minister of First Unitarian Church in New Orleans, and provided ministerial leadership for the developing fellowship for a number of years. And of course, even after that time, he continued to visit us from time to time. And an oak tree was dedicated because of his significance in our church history. Remarkably, the fellowship was led by a president and lay leaders for the first 18 years. The first minister was the Reverend Edgar Toby Van Buren, who served us for 60 years. He was called in 1969. He was followed by the Reverend Glenn Turner, who served us for 5 years. The Reverend Steve Crump was our third called minister. His 36-year ministry, which ended in 2019, is historic in Unitarian Universalism. The Reverend Amy Salmons became our first associate minister in 1997 and served for 1 year. The Reverend Nathan Ryan came as our assistant minister until 2012, became associate in 2016, and was called as our senior minister in 2020. Reverend Chris Long will be installed as our first minister of congregational life in tomorrow's service. A rich legacy of leadership of ministers and presidents has sustained us as the church we are today. And that legacy is visibly represented on the Wall of History. It was my honor and privilege to oversee its development in my role as church historian. I especially invite visitors to view it at some point during your time with us. Diana Dora, our next speaker, is represented on the president's plaque for her 2 terms as president. She has also served in many leadership capacities. Diana.
We'll try. Thank you, everyone. I will focus on our church's social justice actions. First, from our beginnings in 1951, we have wanted to be a good church and to thrive and to grow. Second, we have launched remarkable social justice actions, usually involving issues that came to us, but it was not a linear path. And third, we are called the church that shows up by members of Together Baton Rouge, our local community organization. It turns out that this is an accurate description of our history as well. Some examples. In the 50s and 60s, civil rights was the social justice issue. It was in our face here, as it was throughout the South, and our church responded with resolve and sacrifice. During the Vietnam War, we lost church members on both sides of the issue. After that experience, there was a tendency to attempt to minimize divisive issues. The ERA, nuclear freeze, and the death penalty were difficult issues for us. I remember our reaction in the late 80s to U.S. policy on the wars in Nicaragua and El Salvador. Many board members were very afraid of that issue, afraid it would destroy our church. Others wanted to explore it and got involved and did explore it with the board's reluctant acquiescence. But at that same time, in 1988, we built this sanctuary, increasing our seating capacity from 80 to 325. And we began to grow steadily, from 200 to 300 by the year 2000. With that growth and stability, we became confident that we could engage in social justice action and continue to thrive and grow. Holly will talk about Yoshi Hattori's death in 1992 and our church's response. Gun control definitely came to us. In 2005, Katrina hit New Orleans. The 2 UU congregations, First UU and Community Church UU, were part of a giant diaspora from New Orleans. Hundreds of churches from around the country figured out that we were the closest functioning church and contacted us begging for a way to help. We needed help responding. Our district exec offered me a massage. I said, no, I don't need a massage. We need someone to answer the phone. And answer the emails in every other way that they could get in touch with us. Reverend Marilee Bassett, a community minister and native New Orleanian, came here to help us. Later, we received a grant from the UUA for hurricane recovery and hired Marilee to implement the proposal. Marilyn wanted to do a project in New Orleans to host volunteers from UU churches across the country who would repair homes and the large First UU building and reside in the building. We worked with First UU and Community Church UU to achieve an enormous success. The number of volunteer hours during 2006 was in the tens of thousands. Penny Ramsdale headed our own committee here that oversaw all of the work that was going on in helping with recovery and helping with recoverers. Our own members formed the Weekend Warriors and volunteered on weekends. The project was continued in 2007 under the leadership of the UUA and the UU Service Committee. We recently discovered that Reverend Marilee Bassett died in March of 2021. Our church received the UUA's Bennett Award in 2007, but Marilee was never recognized for her contributions. As Nathan suggested, I am taking a few minutes to focus on her today. She loved her city and dedicated years of work away from her loving family in Berkeley to rebuild houses and churches and lives. She was an inspirational healer with an infectious smile. Despite our considerable social justice history, I believe we are not primarily a social justice church. We are a good church with the resulting capacity for social justice action, and when we are called to action, we show up. Okay, next up, speaking of being up, Dave Bess. We've looked to Dave for financial and presidential leadership over the years, and he gave the most wonderful financial reports. I just felt so comfortable that everything was in the right place, and we were thriving.
I needed to stretch, just like I needed to stretch the books back in the day when I wore the green eye shade at church. This is, I guess, maybe the more serious stuff. But first, I'm going to talk about the year that I was president, 1998-99. First, I want to relate how we came to this church, my wife Suzanne and our 2 children, in the mid-1980s, attracted to the strong and active social justice and human rights programming, and the connection we already had with many church members through other organizations in Baton Rouge that we didn't even know belonged to the Unitarian Church. We're also happy with the church having no need to have a creed. I was a CPA, so I sort of gravitated towards the financial workings of the church, from treasurer, when all the work was done in ledgers by hand, to pledge drives, endowment funding, then president for a year in 1998-99. Suzanne, my wife, was really the one more involved in religious education and social concerns and women's spirituality. She was a leader in the small group ministry branches, and she's still heavily involved in those areas and the other anti-oppression issues. But during my year as president, there were some major challenges to our church community, but I think that every president could say the same, as would be expected in a 70-plus year history that runs through a period of great social and political changes, where not everyone has the same point of view, but all wind up having to come together. Time and again, the church membership and leadership work through local and global issues and work to help each other in times of personal need. I want to comment on just a couple of the more serious events, stressful events from the year that I was president. Prior to my time in office, the congregation decided to add an assistant minister, as mentioned, to our staff, the first in our church history, I think. We did all the work to make sure that we had a good match with the search process and all. And the congregation voted to call the assistant, but for various reasons, after 10 months, she resigned, and there followed a difficult separation. And this, unfortunately, was during my tenure, and it was a stressful time for the leadership and for the congregation, since so much work had gone into the process, and we thought we had made a good move. So it would be 25 years more before we did the same thing again. It took a long time to get over it, I guess. The other major issue that resulted from a long deteriorating relationship with a nursery school that had been in our building for around 25 years. At the time, we were making major renovations, including to this sanctuary and adding on other wings to the building. We were making these renovations and additions to RE classrooms, and after many discussions, a study group, and a congregational meeting on the issue, it was decided that the church needed the RE space for its own programs and would not continue the relationship with the nursery school. This was a very difficult decision, and it was an issue that divided the congregation, as many had sent their children to the nursery school and had close ties there, and even some members in the administration of the school. The one other item, though, on a happier note that I wish to relate, that was near the end of my year as president, the renovations partially for this room and for the, well, it was for the Religious Education Center wing and the music and the administrative wings, came to be dedicated on April 18th, 1999, and we held a ceremony here dedicating them. And along with the architect and the designers and the Capital Fund Chair, Neil Stoltzfus, and our Diana Doro, who is chair of the Building Steering Committee, and many others who worked on this project. I happened to be in the right place at the right time as president, got to accept the keys and make a short speech thanking opening the doors to the additions, and on behalf of the congregation, acknowledge the work of all the persons and all the committees that work together, the persistence and faithfulness with which all members fulfill their duties. I accept the keys, for they represent the many diverse gifts that made this project possible. I might add aside, like all of our projects are made possible like that. And thank you, faithful servants, for this work of excellence. And I got to say, let the people say together, enter in, Unitarian Universalists, enter in and rejoice. And we've been rejoicing in here ever since. Thank you. It's my pleasure to introduce Bobby Thompson, who has been instrumental in many of our social justice programs. Bobby.
I need to stretch too. Y'all notice something? There are 5 women and me and Dave. And Dave is right, he should have invited Suzanne up here too. But I'm honored to be included with this group, and especially the women. They have been remarkable in paving the way for me to be able to express my UU beliefs and my calls to service. My wife and I joined the Unitarian Church of Baton Rouge in 1990. I joined because the church seemed to be the place that provided an on-ramp to do service, and that seemed to have been my calling. From serving from the ministerial committee, that's the first committee I had, serving with Steve, and to working in the RE program, which Beverly Wilson helped to establish, and by the time I got there, it was very well established. To the RE, I said the RE, and to the, I worked my way up from the kindergarten all the way up to the senior youth, which we read the book Ishmael together, and I still have Ishmael in, I still have a stuffed gorilla in an honored place in my house that the high school kids gave me. I also did adult education. I don't call it adult education, but we did things like we did the Bill Moyers program with Bill Moyer with Joseph Campbell. We did that 6-week program. We would watch an hour and then we would discuss for an hour. It was a very, very enlightening program. We also did looking at the spirituality of the music of Curtis Mayfield and Marvin Gaye, as well as Pink Floyd and Roger Waters. We had a lot of fun, and I would love to do that again. But then the mayor, Tom Ed McHugh, held a public community meeting on what color is Baton Rouge. And it was a meeting about racism. And several of our church members, like Diana said, we're the church that shows up. So many of our church members came to this program, and several of us were trained to be facilitators for when the committee, when the organization, the meeting broke up into small groups, we would facilitate what the introduction was, which Maxine Crump did the introduction. She's a well-known news reporter. And after that meeting, there were many people who wanted to continue. And our church was really good in setting up what they call the second mile. And we did church pairings. I think I see y'all back there. Charlie Frowley and Joanne Looney were very instrumental in keeping that situation going. We paired with Camphor Methodist, and that went on for many, many years. In the meantime, Blanche Kano got me involved in the social justice program. And we did what was called the Jubilee Weekend, and it was a program set up by the Kettering Foundation. If you want to know anything about this church, ask these two women here. And I'll tell you a funny, maybe not so funny story about me and Diana. The governor set up a program where they were trying to reduce the prison population. And the way they did it, they had a panel of ex-district attorneys and prosecutors, and different groups would come and present their proposals on how to do this. Well, there was one group that wanted to take marijuana off of the 3 strikes list, meaning that if you got caught with a small amount of marijuana, you wouldn't go to jail for life. Okay? So we're sitting there and we're listening to the proposals, and one group comes in, that group comes in and they make their proposal, and one of the district attorneys said, now let me get this straight. You're not talking about legalizing marijuana, is that right? And the woman doing the presentation said, no, it's just a 3 strikes thing. And the guy goes, well, I was concerned about that because I have a friend in Colorado where they've legalized marijuana, and they have these dogs that have been trained to sniff out marijuana, and now they're unemployed. I swear I was about to bust out laughing when I looked around and there were these faces, and I looked at Diana and she was like, she's my qualified witness. If I told anybody else this story, they would not believe me, but I have Diana. Okay. So after the what is the color of Baton Rouge, we went on. There were a couple of. We wanted to do. I wanted to reach out and be a part of our local community, not just doing what we do as a Unitarian Church of Baton Rouge. So we looked at several different organizations and that were doing this kind of work. We were finally approached by 2 black local ministers, Reverend Melvin Rushing, which I love calling his name, and Reverend Lee Wesley. And they brought to us this grassroots organization that was forming with local religious and community organizations. We brought this to our church and presented to this church what this meant. And we put it to a vote. The church accepted it unanimously. And thanks to Dave, we had the money to pay our dues. So joining Together Baton Rouge has been a great fit. We have done things for the community that I don't think we could have done by ourselves. And a good example is the bus system. We would not have a bus system in Baton Rouge if it wasn't for Together Baton Rouge. And one of the great things about it is that we went into the neighborhoods of the people who were going to be mostly affected, which were the black and brown neighborhoods. So our church went to these neighborhoods, knocking on doors, and having the people sign a referendum saying not how to vote, but just saying you will vote. It absolutely meant nothing. But the people signed them, and we overwhelmingly passed the vote to maintain our bus system. And once we got the bus system, dedicated funds, we started getting funds from everywhere. Funds from the government, funds from the state. So we have a bus system that is viable thanks to our association with Together Baton Rouge. And I also want to say Becky Curl had at the same time an outreach program that was very healthy. It was with the Interfaith Federation. We do an annual toy drive in North Baton Rouge. We also have the Holy Grill that we participate in. So these are things, social justice doesn't mean just fighting for what am I trying to say? Not just for racism. It also is helping the people relieve their suffering. And that's what we take on these kind of issues. Holly Haymaker joined the social justice team, and we really took off after that. We had seminars, we had speakers come in and talk to us about different things. We had discussions on gun control, on racism, on just a lot of different things. We had book discussions. And Holly was just tirelessly working for social justice. And then I have to call Jane Webb, who also co-sponsored with the social justice team. Robbie Madden is also a member of our church who worked tirelessly after that What Color is Baton Rouge, and people wanted to go forward. We started putting together informal groups on discussing racism, but we realized we needed a curriculum. Maxine Crump and Robbie worked on a curriculum. Once we had a curriculum, Robbie hit the streets. She got us into more boardrooms and businesses and churches to get our program going. We must have taken this to 1,000 people, many of them in our church. Now there is a Robbie Madden conference room for Dialogue on Race, Louisiana, in Our Lady of the Lake Hospital. That, trust me, that's a long way. I was born in Our Lady of the Lake Hospital when black doctors could not perform in Our Lady of the Lake. They had the Negro ward, which was the basement. My wife was hired by Our Lady of the Lake as a nurse and worked for 35 years. Gave us a good income, a good life to live by. And now to see Robbie's name on this conference room is amazing. And I'm very proud of that. I'm very proud of this church. And now I'll give you Holly Haymaker, who has been a tremendous support for this church.
Following Bobby is tough, especially when my topic is not fun. I want to talk about just one topic in social justice. In October 17th, 1992, our 16-year-old Japanese exchange student, Yoshi Hattori, was shot and killed by a homeowner who owned 9 guns and said he was afraid. 3 days later, a memorial service was held in this sanctuary. Reverend Steve Crump walked to the pulpit and said, "Guns, guns, guns. How could this not have happened here?" This service and his words set the tone to our response. My husband, Richard, who doesn't join anything, heard his words and joined the church. He felt here is a place to gather and to act. But how to respond? As in many social justice issues, the answer came to us. In Japan, there's a tradition of citizens creating petitions around areas of concern. The Hattoris, Yoshi's parents, and their friends created a petition, and within weeks they had over 1,000 signatures. In response, our church committee wrote its own petition. It mirrored the Hattori request and asked that the U.S. president make this country safer from guns. And so began our year of petitions. Hours and hours of church volunteer time were spent copying petitions, sending them out, opening the letters that returned, counting signatures. And during that year of gathering petitions, other things happened. For example, Sarah Brady, who was the head of the Brady organization at the time, came and spoke right over there at our church in favor of the Brady Bill. A year after Yoshi died, a memorial was held outside the church at night in which a handgun was melted down and turned into a small spade. The spade was used to plant memorial daffodils all along the front of the church. In November '93, a year later, Clinton met with the Hattoris and with the Haymakers, and we delivered the petitions. 135,000 signatures from the US and 1.7 million from Japan. Wow. Our number may have been a whole lot smaller, but it was the largest list of supporters and ultimately formed the basis for future grassroots campaign. And remember, this was '93. There was no internet. This was all US Postal Service and lots of work. The Baton Rouge mayor created a commission on fear and violence. The commission designed a beautiful memorial to be placed near City Hall. But loud voices of gun owners and veterans shut down the memorial. But not before 2 very large stones had arrived as a gift from a landscaper in Nagoya. The mayor said, "What will we do with these stones? We have them now. What will we do with them?" So we said, "We'll take them in sanctuary." And they indeed provide a sanctuary, which is our Peace Garden, and they're in the center of our Peace Garden. If you want to read a little more about this, you can look at that. 20 years after Yoshi's death, his family requested some sort of commemoration. So we put together a full day-and-a-half conference, and the list of volunteers with this church to put that conference together is more than 2 pages long. And church members continue to work on issues of violence in many ways. They lobby with Moms Demand Action on Guns, which is the organization in Louisiana that works on this. And Irene Cato is a church member who makes a paper crane every year and adds it to one on a chain of cranes representing how old Yoshi would be. And it's hung from his portrait, which you can see over there near the kitchen. This simple, consistent kindness touches Yoshi's parents deeply. Response to injustice is never simple. So much attention was paid to the death of this fine young man, while firearms are the #1 killer of children and adolescents in the US. And we are not ignoring all those others who were killed. And we will continue to make this a safer world. Now, it is more than my It is my privilege to introduce Dottie Kelly, who descended with her angels in early 2007, the one best thing that happened after Katrina. Certainly good for us. She's the queen of welcoming us. She helps make connections and roots and branches programs. She is now our chief archivist, because we're not going to last forever, so somebody has to organize this. Thank you.
Thank you. First, I'd like to thank you, each and every one of you. Oops, sorry. Not used to this. How about this? Yeah. Okay. I thank you for coming, because it shows that you have some interest in what's been going on and what we're doing here in the community and our standing in the community. And you wanted to know more about it. And we're so happy that you came and that you've listened so attentively to these wonderful, wonderful speakers. And they've told you so much that it's the reason that I'm still here since 2007. My part in this picture is very minor, really. Back in 2015, our office manager had run out of closet space, and she asked me if I would help her clean out the closets because of all that junk that all those previous office managers had just put into boxes and shoved into every nook and cranny in this place. And she had run out of room. So I said, yeah, I like cleaning out closets. I'm very methodical, kind of OCD about neatness and so on. So enlisted two other ladies who are very ducks in the row type people. And we started cleaning out closets and assembling all these boxes of stuff, going through paper after paper after paper and deciding, no, we don't need this copy of the mowing bill from 78. But what we do need is to get our records straight and keep everything that tells this story. Not only paper. Becky is our historian, and she has kept the history up to date and revises it, and it's in all of our publications, it's on our website, and we need to know that. That's history books. But we have pictures, we have plaques, we have certificates, we have lots of things like RE would take pictures of the classes doing their fun things, and they would make little albums. Somebody would take pictures of our Thanksgiving dinners and so on, the fun things. They would make albums. So we have assembled a table of exhibits out there to give you an idea of the range of things that we keep in our new archives department, initiated 2015. To show you that all of this needs to be remembered. And as Holly says, we're not going to be around forever, and we want it passed on to our children. How this church started small and grew, and the issues we faced, and we want to honor the people who were members during these various times. It may seem minor, but for instance, we have membership list. Every time in one of those boxes that we'd run across a membership list, went in that pile, you know. And board minutes would go in this pile. So that now we have papers that are chronological, they're logical, they're cataloged, they're indexed, and we can find what we're looking for. I wish I could have invited each of you to come look at our archives room, but it just so happens that a decision has been made that we're going to move it from way back there in the dark parts of the church up to the front hall so that it will be easier accessed by our membership. And people can go in there and sit and look at things. Don't take, look and reminisce and learn more about things that have happened in the past. Now, outside of the archives room, we've also taken on the responsibility to catalog and keep accurate all copies of newsletters, orders of service, like that one. And we keep obituaries of our deceased people. And another phase of it is outside of the archives room is our treehouse. Since December 2019, we went into a new sound system and lighting system. And they have a capacity up there of recording all of everything that comes through these microphones. So everything's being recorded, and now with the new technology that's available, they can keep it on disk and flash drives and things like that. So we are moving from the paper stage, which is very cumbersome and it doesn't last forever, so that we're planning for our future, that if one of our children come back and are doing their doctoral dissertation on social justice in Baton Rouge, they can come here and do research, and we can show them what this church has done and the people who were involved. We also have an excellent, we think it's excellent, congregational care team that looks after our members in their times of need. And we're keeping records of things that we do along that line too, to show the compassionate heart of this church. We, as Becky mentioned, of course, we have a list of all of our presidents, but everybody who does anything around here in an organized way, we want them to be able to we want their work to live on in those lists that we keep. There's two of us. Connie Holmes is my partner in archives. And I'll leave with this request for donations. Not money, that's somebody else's problem. I would like for people to bring us things that you've kept at your house that has to do with what went on, that you were involved in the church. Becky has been wonderful to bring things from her home, because naturally she had an office as historian and she kept a lot of stuff. So we will take it, bless it, and then catalog it, put it in the proper place, index it, and it can become part of our archives too. Remember, look, don't touch, don't take.
Is that all the energy our pillars get for sharing of 70 plus years of history? I hope not. Again, we thank you all for coming to Baton Rouge. If you're visiting from near and far, and the members of the congregation, thank you for your dedication. The title and theme for this weekend is Tilling the Soil, Fortifying the Promise of Our Unitarian Universalist Faith. In connection with this, I had members of the Installation Planning Committee go to 5 of the locations where this church has moved from. Soil was gathered from all of those places and are placed in these canisters. So do take a look at these soils and also the wall of history out as you're going to enjoy some more of the leftover treats. And again, we hope to see some of you this evening for the gumbo and spaghetti Welcome to Baton Rouge, Louisiana at 5:45 p.m. Take good care. Thank you very much, and see you all soon.